there you have it with Vajra Ma and Ava. We are talking about the likely outcome of the revelations of the Epstein files and the effect they might or might not have on today's political landscape. Some are cynical, and I understand that. A recent article said that most American men did not think that having sex with a 13, 14, or 15-year-old girl was much of a problem. They see it as pretty normal. They think that, yes, it falls technically under the category of sex with children or minors, but they think there is a world of difference between having sex with a 14-year-old or even a 13-year-old girl from having sex with a 5-year-old girl. And to be clear, that's not sex, that's rape of a child. But for men, many men, average men across America, a teenager is what they might call fair game. They won't admit publicly that they feel this way. They won't admit it to their wives, but that's how they talk and joke among themselves. Jailbait. So the cynics might say, and I totally see their point, half of the American public is going to have not much of a problem with Trump being implicated in this debacle. It's just what men do. We don't blame him. It's just unfortunate that he got caught. Now, more hopeful people think these revelations will affect things permanently. And Vajra, are you among those hopefuls? And if so, tell us why.
Oh, I definitely am, because the press conference that was held a few months ago by the survivors of Epstein that was held in Washington, D.C., I think is a turning point. And in addressing, why, rape for a 5-year-old, well, it was rape for these 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old girls, because they call it rape. And what happened was extremely damaging to their confidence and to their psyches, and was hidden for years. And the government ignored the hundreds of women who filed complaints, buried it. But I'm hopeful because the public is now getting educated. It's getting educated about the real trauma of what's happened to these women. And these women are also speaking out for, not just for themselves, they don't want pity. They're grown women now. They've worked through a lot of healing, and they're still working through it. But they are thinking about the children behind them, all the children, the young children and the children, the teen children. I'm hopeful because here's why. It is the core. This is the core. This kind of abuse of women is the core of modern civilization, and civilization as it has been for the last 6,000 to 10,000 years. Patriarchy, which is male domination, subjugation of women. And what's bothering me, though, Ava, is that even though this is the core of all of the abuses that are happening on the planet, with a civilization that's out of control, the pollution of the earth, the ravaging of animals, factory farming animals, the sex trafficking, abuse of children, abuse of women, abuse of young boys, all of this corruption and war and violence of all kinds, okay, it had been perpetrated by the shift that was made from matriarchal cultures, which were egalitarian, men and women working together. There was no domination over men. They worked together, but women had the basic lead and were respected as the wisdom holders and the ultimate guide, though they worked in, harmony and in cooperation in developing the mores of their culture, the indigenous cultures, matriarchal cultures.
Well, and isn't it true that in those cultures, women were responsible, most of them, most of those cultures, women were responsible for the distribution of resources? Is that true?
Yes. Yes, according to Heide Gutner-Abendroth, who's done 50 years of research into matriarchies, past and present, because there's still some still extant on the earth today, as you and I know. Um,
Yeah.
Basic, absolute core to whether it's a matriarchy or not is the women did have the final say on the distribution of resources. Women don't starve their children and they don't make them homeless. Okay, basic. Yeah,
And in
yeah,
many of these cultures, women were the ones who made the final decision as to when the clan or the tribe might go to war.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
As in the
Yeah.
Iroquois, and they decided when they would go to war, and then they would hand the weapons over to the men. That's an example of matriarchal wisdom. Yeah. So I think what the point that I wanted to make, especially today, was that in all of the talk, wonderful talk and exposure that is happening about the Epstein files and about the sex trafficking, um, in all of this talk, everyone, even the survivors, are talking around it, but never pinpoint naming it the way radical feminists do, and radical meaning going to the root, not extreme, but means radical to the root.
The root.
Talking around, yeah, talking around the root and not never really naming the root, which is this subjugation of women and misogyny. You know, people are defending the women, the abuse, the horror, and they're calling out the perpetrators, but nobody's like naming that this is, as you and I know, is core to all of the violence that's going on the planet and all of the suffering, the unnecessary suffering. Some suffering is necessary. An earthquake happens, and people suffer. And then you get together and you. But I'm talking about the suffering that most of which is human made.
It's the final thing that won't be talked about. It's the final secret that nobody wants to
Yeah,
identify publicly.
yeah, and it's a form of erasure of women in a very, very, very subtle way.
Right.
And it's like when you talk about battered women and battered wives, not naming the perpetrator, and you've spoken to this, not naming
Yeah.
it's a man who's been battering this woman, not
Right.
naming the perpetrator. It's like, yeah. So
Right.
I think it's
Yeah, they
really
just sort of
important.
get battered. They're just walking around the planet and, some mysterious force batters them. It's just ridiculous. So let me ask you
Yeah.
this. You say you are hopeful because you think there's something different about this situation now. We had back in 2020, was it? October of 2020, we had the whole Me Too thing crop up. And many men were named, and one or two even went to jail. Harvey Weinstein did his perp walk, and Bill Cosby, and that. But did anything change? So to me, it seemed like no. It was a good step, but I did not see anything fundamentally change in society. What do you think is different about this whole era of revelation of the Epstein files?
Well, I think it's connected. There's a continuum, and if you're going to reverse the reversal of 6 to 10,000 years, because that's exactly what patriarchy is a reversal of the truth. Men are in charge and need to be in charge and are superior and all this kind of stuff. And we're superior over the earth and we have to, dominate the earth. That reversal, it's going to take a while to reverse it back. And the reason I'm hopeful right now is going, the Me Too is a continuum of what's happening now, or what's happening now is a continuum of Me Too. It
Right.
didn't die it's not just a flash in the pan. It takes a while for these things to gain momentum. And what's happening now is this is so highly visible. And the MAGA whole movement was built, and Trump did his last, run for president on we're going to expose the Epstein files or the Epstein files. We're going to expose the Democratic Party as the party of pedophiles. Oh, talk about a projection. So there's the reversal right there.
Yeah.
The Democrats are the pedophiles, and so when it's really just a projection. So we're now coming to the point where MAGA is fracturing. You've got Marjorie Taylor Greene, you've got Nancy Vance,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
yeah, and
We see it. We see it. Mhm.
yeah, and they're Republicans that are speaking out in behalf of women and demanding that the Epstein files be released. So what we have is this reversal being unreversed, about to be unreversed, and more is going to come out about the Epstein files. And it already is. We got another 22,000 of, from the Epstein
Right,
estate.
right.
So I'm hopeful because it's a snowball that's not going to stop rolling down the hill.
Okay.
So let's watch the
Now, so
progress.
far, Trump has been pretty much a Teflon president. He's had many, many serious accusations and things that have been absolutely proved by, video that he's done.
Yeah.
Grab him by the pussy, I mean, we've heard his words, we've seen the video. And yet somehow all those things did not prevent him from attaining the presidency, not once, but twice. How do you think this will affect his presidency?
I think he's going to go down.
Okay.
I do.
Okay.
Because his supporters, his base is fracturing. And his base has been brainwashed by Fox News, as we know, and now Newsmax. And we know them to be liars. It's been proven. I think this is different because his base has believed that the Democrats, through the brainwashing of, regime propaganda at Fox News, etc., they have believed that the Democrats are the pedophile ring, are the pedophiles. And we know that that's not true. And it's a projection.
Pizzagate.
Pizzagate, all of that. And now they themselves, so many of them are demanding that the files be released, still thinking it's going to exonerate him, and it won't. He's been able to get as far as he has in the second term after all these proven lies, shows how deep the rot is, how deep the fear is of being out of control of life. And that, again, goes to the core of what patriarchy is. Patriarchy wants to control life and therefore, is afraid of not controlling and dominating. And that's why women have had to be dominated and subjugated.
Right. We are the life bringers. Yeah. So if you believe this article from which I quoted at the beginning of our short talk here, if you believe that the average American man does not see having sex with a 13-year-old as much of a problem, if the average American man believes that it's basically normal, natural, and his right to have sex with a very young girl, then how do you think that is going to play into all of this? Obviously, if they continue to believe that and think that in the face of all these obviously provable allegations, what does that kind of speaks to a more cynical viewpoint. You've got millions of American men who don't see this as a problem.
I think misogyny runs deeply in almost all men, even the good ones. They don't realize how misogynist they are, how afraid they are of women's power, And this brings me to an important point. There are two windows in human consciousness, in the development of the human brain and psyche, where new neural pathways, extremely important pathways, can be laid down. The first is infancy, and this is proven in this is a scientific study. The first is infancy, that time when the infant bonds with the mother. It's so crucial, and so much of that is missed by the way our birthing practices are, that baby ripped away and thrown on a cold plate and And the other one is around age 15 or 16. And that is the age that men go for the Shakti. 15-year-olds, like your study just said, just fine. So there's a rationalization. Men need women's Shakti. And they need women's power and fire, and they're afraid to surrender to it in a way that brings power to both of us. In the tradition, in Hindu tradition, no one ever says, there's the Purana, Shakti Purana, some scripture. Sorry, I wasn't planning on quoting it, but she says, Shakti says, the goddess says, nobody says that a man is Shiva-less. They say he's Shakti-less. Men get their virility from Shakti, and women are the main embodiment of Shakti when it comes to human beings. And
so they're literally, when they rape, they're literally plugging in to the source of
Yes.
Shakti in the
Yes.
physical human realm.
Exactly. And that's what rape is about. That's what it's
Right.
really about. And they don't even know it. It's unconscious. And so it becomes this destruction of this distortion of the Shakti that they could receive in a loving, benevolent,
Right.
egalitarian relationship. Now, it's
Right.
interesting that in the Hindu religion, the Kali religion, the Kali, there's a version of Kali that's 16 years old, the 16-year-old Kali, because the 16-year-old girl or 15-year-old girl is just radiant with Shakti,
Just vibrant
just
with Shakti. Yeah.
bursting. And she
Just
doesn't
bursting.
even know. And that's why they prey on her at that time. And it's
Hmm.
also well, when I've listened to a lot of the interviews in the last few weeks with survivors of the Epstein abuse, and they've pointed out, more than once pointed out, that he never went above 25 years old. They're all younger. They're younger because the neocortex doesn't develop until age 26 or 27. When you start to make an executive decision, make executive decisions, that's an important part of the brain. So you're much more vulnerable to being persuaded and led and misguided and influenced under the age of 27. So then he plugs into the younger girls because they're radiant with Shakti.
Right. Right.
Hello.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody talks about this awareness of the female power and the
Mhm.
female power over the male psyche.
It's interesting to me that on the surface, first of all, I completely agree with everything you've just said about Shakti and its importance in terms of woman-man relationships. But it's interesting to me that men, the average man, not all men, yes, I know, not all men, can superficially feel towards women as if they are not human. He can other them to the point where they're just an object for his gratification. And yet, underneath that must be an awareness of her beauty, her power, her Shakti, her ultimate humanity, the template for humanity. So it's interesting that their consciousness seems to be split in that way because they treat women, the average man, in many ways. Obviously, it's a continuation of a scale. Some are worse than others, and there are many wonderful men, of course. But they treat women as if we are not human. Your thoughts?
Oh, that hits home. It makes me very sad. I mean, makes me like, it pains me. Oh, back in whatever century it was, there was an actual vote taken by the church members, the church leaders, the men. Does a woman have a soul?
Yes, right,
Literally,
right,
they voted on
right.
that. And they
Yeah.
decided yes, but by one vote only, and one by
And
one
it's
vote.
interesting that in the history of animal rights, which really corresponded with women's rights along the path, the general public decided that animals had souls before they agreed that women had souls. How do you think these revelations will hit them in terms of realizing that we are human?
I don't think that we need a majority of people. We know this. We don't need a majority of people, men or women, to flip the cultural narrative.
We
And
know
if you
that
flip
tipping
the
point is a thing. Yes, right.
tipping point, yes. And if you get that tipping point, what will move down through the generations, maybe the younger men, younger boys, you're going to have a different culture, a different understanding of women. And I think we're going to reach that tipping point, but that doesn't mean it's going to like wake up the average men and the awful men who are around today. So I'm not putting my eggs in the basket of majority of men. Okay, we don't
Right.
need a majority
Right.
of. Yeah.
And if we had more time, this would lead us into a conversation of how sex robots are going to it really affect many of these points in our conversation. That's a whole other conversation that we'll have another time.
Yeah. Um, what I'd like to leave as a final note is take us back to the fact that misogyny, as being the core and foundation of patriarchy, which is male domination, which is what has caused all of the suffering through wars, violence, earth pollution and degradation, all of that is connected to the fear of the power of women, the fear and hatred of women, misogyny. And I would like to name that as a focal point to what's coming out with the Epstein files and this sex trafficking and all of this conversation, because nobody is naming it. Nobody in the mainstream and even the independent media, nobody is naming it for what it is. This is the misogyny that has been going on for centuries, okay? And its core.
Thank you so much. We've always have the best conversations. Thank you, Vajra.
Thank you.
And there you have it. Blessed
And there
be.
you have it. Blessed be.